On today's show, Laura Heywood interviews.
Here to talk about his solo album, The Long Haul, and much more, two-time Tony Award winner, Norbert Leo Butz. Welcome to Laura Heywood Interviews. I'm Laura Heywood. To say that today's guest is a stalwart of the Broadway stages is an understatement. Not only is he in high demand for leading roles, he's been in some of the biggest name productions in the history of Broadway. I'm talking Rent, Wicked, My Fair Lady. Other starring roles on Broadway include Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Big Fish, Dead Accounts, Enron, Is He Dead, Speed the Plow, and my absolute favorite, Catch Me If You Can. You can't see it because it's radio, and I don't know whether he noticed, but I'm wearing an official Catch Me If You Can t-shirt from 2011 today. In addition to his legendary career on the stage, Norbert Leo Butz is a wildly talented songwriter, and his album, The Long Haul, is the first full-length album he's written entirely by himself. As a fan of his earlier albums, Memory and Mayhem, Girls, 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 and the Angel Band Project, which is a benefit for a charity we'll talk about in a bit, I can say this is my favorite of them all, and I'm delighted we're actually going to be able to share a tune or two with you today. The Long Haul is a country blues record that has a deep, beautiful sadness running through it, along with a sense of perseverance and a heart determined to keep on loving. If I didn't know that Norbert was a show tunes kind of guy based in New York City, it would be easy to believe this record was written by a long-haul trucker with 1 million miles behind him and thousands more to go, which is why The Long Haul is the perfect name for this heartbreaking, hearty collection of songs. Here to give us a taste of his voice, sans jazz hands, is the indomitable, steadfast, beautiful soul that is Norbert Leo Butz. Welcome.
Hey, Laura. Thanks so much.
Thank you for coming in.
Please. Thanks for having me on this freezing,
It is freezing,
day.
And it also we're live on Martin Luther King Day, which is the day most people don't have to leave the house,
Right.
and you did.
Happily.
Oh, well, thank you. We've got a full hour ahead of us, and I've got your album, and I've got your permission to play some music, so I'm excited about that. I was just going over how many times I've seen you over the years, both on the Broadway stage, at 54 Below, in benefit shows. You are always one to say yes when people ask about doing shows for free to benefit great causes. And it occurred to me that even though, like, we've crossed paths, we've met, we know each other, but only sort of professionally and peripherally, I guess. But I know, like, a ridiculous amount of intimate facts about you because of how open you are on stage and in interviews. Can you talk about, like, being candid about your private life on stage and, like, whether you're comfortable with that or whether you just talk about it in spite of not being comfortable? Like, some examples. I'm not going to give specifics, but, like, I know a lot about your relationships, including, like, ones that have fallen apart and come back together. I know about there have been tragic losses. There are also things that aren't quite so deep. Like, I know it's your birthday next week. I know you have all-boy dogs. I know that you were going to be an academic and then you moved to New York at 29. And, like, 7 weeks later, you were starring on Broadway. I even know about your arrest record. And this is all not from things you've told me privately, but from things that are, like, in the public domain.
You know, Laura, all I can say, I think I'm a very impulsive person. I think I start talking, and I tell myself, be a little bit more guarded on this one, man. And I don't know. You're like an extremely open, like, approachable person, and I think that's what I do. I think if I trust the person that I'm talking with, stuff just comes to come out. Yeah, I guess I don't have a lot to hide, really. But it's interesting. I think why a lot of us become actors, you know, in the first place, is to kind of say difficult things and but be protected.
Right, because you're saying them under the guise of
a character. And a plot. Yeah, but you're still expressing things that are really, really personal to you. So yeah, I guess in some ways I am an open book. Although, as I get older, I'm learning to maybe keep a little bit more to play the cards a little closer to my chest. You know.
How much of The Long Haul is based on your true experiences versus being a storytelling mechanism for sort of your own fictional characters? Yeah,
you know, the record, it was a bucket list thing. I've been a closet songwriter really since I was a teenager. Like, I've always just sort of done it. I think I started playing guitar. I grew up playing piano and singing, non-theater stuff, and then picked up the guitar in high school and through college, even though I was in an acting program, working on a BFA and then an MFA after that, I always had side projects. I was always doing open mics and little duos and trios and starting little bands.
Do you remember the name of your first band?
I do. I was in high school and oh my God, this is such a bad name for a band.
Tell me.
Oh, it's really bad. My first high school band, we were called Strike Four. I don't even know.
Were you baseball guy?
I do like baseball. I don't even know what it means. I don't know what a strike for. It's terrible. And then my college band was called. I had a really good friend. Her name was Effie, and we would be playing to like 8 people, like in a coffee shop. My friend Bobby and I started this band. We had a couple guitars. And my friend Effie would come, and as a joke, she would bring a bra.
Oh, okay.
Not but bring an extra, take it out of her purse, and
throw
it
on
at the stage.
Yeah.
So we called ourselves Effie's Bra was the name of the band. Then we changed it to the Dustmen. I don't know, Laura. They're all terrible.
The Dustmen sounds like Alfred Doolittle's band.
It does. It does. I never put that together. Anyway, so as I started to work more consistently as an actor, I've always felt like I've served 2 masters a little bit. Like acting was kind of like my day job.
Yeah.
And then, backstage, waiting for a setup on a film set, in my trailer, in my dressing room, I've just always kept, guitars and keyboards and just play. That's what I do to sort of like calm myself down. And I think I was in the last season of Bloodline, maybe the second season, which was an awesome experience, but really isolating. We shot that series way down in Isla Mirada, Florida, in the Keys.
Oh, wow. That's not too bad.
Was,
it's isolating, but
it was awesome.
I bet it was beautiful.
The most incredible job. But there was a lot of downtime. There's nothing to do down there. On days when I wouldn't shoot, I would just sit and play, and all these songs that were sort of half finished. And I had been through a lot, really, in my 40s, like sort of you were alluding to. There was just a lot of loss in that whole decade.
Yeah.
A sister, a brother, my dad. It was just this decade of a lot of loss, and I just found myself sort of writing songs just kind of started pouring out of me. I guess that second season of Bloodline. And I made a bunch of demos, and I sent them to a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, Jason Laughlin, guitar player, who lives in Williamsburg. I was like, is there anything here? They're just not letting go of me. I've got this desire to say something as myself, not hiding behind a character. But I was really scared. I was like, are they good enough? It's too personal, like you said. I'm writing about a lot of kind of heavy subjects.
How amazing that you had somebody you could trust to ask that question.
Totally.
And trust to give you an honest answer.
And I'm telling you, Jason Laughlin, the guy that produced this for me, and he's a good buddy of mine, and my wife and a couple of other friends, a brother of mine, man, I did not want to do it. I would record a couple tunes, and I'm like, I'm done. I can't do it. And keep going. And so I finally completed it, I guess, after I finished Bloodline, and then I got busy, and then I did another series, and then I did My Fair Lady, and then it seemed like, so the long haul too is sort of like it took 15 years to get this thing sort of made and written, but I'm really proud that it finally I released it at the end of 2019, and I've had some great feedback on it, and it's been a wonderful experience.
Do you feel like there's one song more than the others that is true to you and your story?
They're all extremely personal, and they're all true. I guess the one song, the title song, it's called The Long Haul, and I have 3 daughters. My oldest daughter is 22, and I have a 20-year-old. And I think when I wrote that song 2 or 3 years ago, they were both in high school, struggling.
Being a high school girl is a fate worse than death, I think.
Right, isn't
it?
it?
I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I just actually did a TED Talk, my second, and this one was about how surviving basically what I consider a terminal depression. I was deeply suicidal in high school. I survived a couple of attempts, and how now I'm this professional joy maker, and it was the muscles that I developed just staying alive that gave me the skills I needed to go beyond just surviving into thriving.
Wow.
And people often say to me now, like, oh, your life is you're amazing. You're like hang out with Tony winners. And, and it's like, that's true. And also I struggled more than you could ever know.
Yeah, it was a long
haul. And it really was,
you.
it was. And it was a function of my biology.
Yeah.
Like, luckily for me, medication also has helped my whole life. But, but for me, once puberty ended, my hormones leveled out. But I describe being a teenage girl, and then we'll get back to your story. I describe being a teenage girl as being under the influence of an infinite number of drugs that go in and out of your system at unpredictable times, and still being expected to act like a rational human being.
Yep.
And so I feel for you as a father.
Well, it is part of my story, what you're talking about, because to observe that as a parent, to have so little control over that as a parent, I've struggled too with mental health issues, my whole life, but it's different for teenage boys than it is for teenage girls. I was totally unequipped to sort of help my girls through these difficult years. And so that song is just a letter to my girls, particularly one of them who is really, really struggling with serious issues, food issues, and self-harming issues, and all kinds of things. And so it was written in a really, really dark hour, but the song is just one big, I love you, I believe in you, it will get better, please hang in there. And so, yeah, and I've played that song live a few times, and it is the song that people kind of go, hey man, what instigated that song? Or people relate to it.
Yeah, I think I first heard it back in September 2017 and a 54 Below show.
Oh, that's right. I did do it there.
You did a few songs from that album. You did Hotel Bride,
Yep.
South Mountain Waltz, and The Long Haul. So,
Oh, wow.
So yeah.
Well, you did do your research, man.
Well, it's easy when the outlet sends you a list. Like 54 Below is great about sending
Yeah.
set lists. So I just Googled it. I just went back in my email and looked up what you played there. But I remember that song. What would you think about playing it for the audience, letting them hear it?
Totally.
And then doing some more talking.
Absolutely.
All right, from Norbert Leo Butz's The Long Haul, here is the title track.
I hear that you're trying to hide all your crying and failing. Your friends say your spark lost its glow in the dark. You're sailing on waters where good sons and daughters get lost. The storms are just raging inside. You sleep without dreams. Awake, you just try not to scream. I love you all through this mess. I'll never think of you. Anything less than stars up above you. Come on, get dressed. Let's walk through your door. Yeah, I'll love you more. Watching you work through the history that hurt you is lonely. See a boyfriend of 2 years, he's sends a text with no real tears, says it's not you, it's me. So your bedroom becomes the one place you feel safe. You stop wearing makeup 'cause you can't stand your own face. The pills they prescribe make you dizzy and dry in your cave. You just hide.
I identify with this so much. I mean, luckily not so much anymore.
Yeah.
But like, the medicine making you dizzy and the, stop wearing makeup and just the only place you feel safe is your bedroom.
Yeah. It's a real thing. It's mental illness is still a stigma. I'm so glad we're sort of talking about it. People who have chemical imbalances, people who have been through traumas that are sudden and shocking, things like PTSD. You put that in the mix of just being an adolescent or a teenager or a human in a society that is constantly marketing to the things that you don't have, the things that you need to make you complete, social media compounding the culture of comparing and despairing.
I can't even imagine. I doubt I would have survived it if social media had existed.
It's a heavy trip.
Either that or I would have shared way too much about myself.
And the thing with my girls, so my oldest daughter was born in 97, my second daughter was born in 2000. So that's the first generation of kids who never knew life without a smartphone. That's the first generation of kids, right? Who there's no before. There's no before that.
Yeah, 97 was the year I graduated from high school. So, and I didn't get my first cell phone until 2002.
Right.
I guess when everybody did, but I was 23 or I was out of college.
Yeah.
And I had my first email address at 16. So I was a kid without the internet.
Right.
And then an adolescent with email, and then an adult with the internet.
So what we know now that we didn't even know 10, 15 years ago, right? What I know now is that with that kind of accessibility to the internet, to social media, comes a tremendous amount of responsibility, which an undeveloped mind does not have yet. So they have all of this power and don't know how to apply any of it. And that's a really dangerous thing. Both of my girls really, went through some really terrible times because of social media. And I mean, I'm 52, so it's been a steep learning curve for me to learn how to accept that technology, that social media is part of their identity. It's part of their worldview, and it's not mine. I'll give you an example. I was my second daughter. Girls, I love you. I hope you're not mad at me for sharing all this stuff. They're so cool. They're amazing now. But my middle daughter, we were dealing with an issue. She was having some problems in college, and she's like, "You're just always on my case. It's too much pressure." So I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna leave her alone. I'm gonna not text her every day like she's telling me to." And we hadn't talked in a couple of weeks, but I had been sending her texts, but we hadn't talked on the phone. And finally, she comes back home. We go out for breakfast, and she starts crying, and she's like, "Dad, all you do is yell at me. All you do is yell at me." I said, "Honey, what are you talking about? We haven't even spoken in 3 weeks. What do you mean I always yell at you?" And she's like, "You don't yell at me. Look what you said." And she brings up these texts. And I had capitalized and put exclamation points on the text. And she's sobbing. She says, "You have to stop yelling at me."
Wow.
And I had my mind cracked open. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's literally hearing those texts, just like you and I would hear a loud person up in your face. That's a really steep learning curve for me. As a sort of, Luddite in the whole world of
I totally
this stuff.
get that.
It's a real thing.
Well, and what I've read some really interesting articles about the way that text speak developed, and that the most interesting thing to me is that nobody taught anybody how what text speak is, that your kids' generation and my generation to a certain degree, mostly because, like, for me personally, I was very embedded in social media early, like more like a millennial than a Gen Xer.
Sure.
But we're all native speakers of it, and we all sort of understand. Like, I had a talk with some of my interns back in my days at, the big satellite radio company, and we were talking about how the word, if you go hi, just hi, it means one thing. If you put hi with a period, it means something totally else.
Isn't that incredible?
And then if you say put hi with like 5 periods or like with 5 eyes, hi, like if you really just want to like joyfully say hello to somebody, you go like hi with a whole bunch of eyes.
Oh my
and if you were
gosh.
to ever just put hi with no punctuation,
Yeah.
that's like you're mad at them. It's passive aggressive.
Getting that into my mind that this is a different language.
Yeah, it is.
It's a different mode of communicating. So it's, a lot of this stuff, a lot of trying to connect with my kids, this sort of powerlessness that we have as parents, a lot of the songs on the record about long-term relationships. I went through a divorce. I'm remarried now happily.
You have another daughter.
And I have a third daughter. It's about a lot of these things.
So that, since you bring up the fact that you were divorced, you remarried, you did a show with Sherry Renee Scott called Two-Hander that was like a residency almost at 54 Below.
Yeah.
That venue's getting a lot of plugs. I should ask them to sponsor the podcast.
No kidding.
And you two have a long, almost 2 decades long friendship.
Yeah.
And that went through both of you going through divorces and finding your new partners. And your relationship with her, I imagine, has been important to a similar degree because of the longevity as the other women in your life.
Yeah.
You guys are, I think, will always be thought of as, a duo.
Yeah.
If not a couple, but
right. The 54 Below asked the two of us to do a night together, and actually, I pitched it to them. I told Sherry, I was like, hey, we got to go. This would be amazing. Let's go in and do last 5 year songs and great classic duets from theater and from pop music.
Yeah, you were like, we'll do anything you could do. I can do better.
Exactly. Like I thought, I wanted it to be a night of just like, belting our faces off and telling funny stories. And as we started to kind of curate some songs together, we sort of saw a different narrative. And Sherry has, in the interim, since she's been acting, has turned into this wonderful playwright. And so...
Yeah, well, it was always in her for anybody who saw...
right.
Oh my gosh, why am I blanking on the name? The show that was...
Everyday Rapture.
Yeah, Everyday Rapture,
Yeah.
which I think I saw like 7 or 8 times.
Yeah, and then she did another show called Piece of Meat, which was really, really, really interesting too.
Was that one also autobiographical?
Yeah, I mean, Sherry works in this kind of super interesting theatrical place in terms of like...
she has a lot of characters named Sherry.
Yes. Yeah, it's sort of meta. She's kind of doing performance art, really, is what... And I don't know, we kind of dared each other, just like, oh my God, do we talk about this stuff? Because there's no other actor that I've had a relationship like with Sherry. We have done so many projects together. Usually in our business of theater, you get a gig, you go to first day of rehearsal, you might have a couple friends in the show, a lot of times you don't. You form this kind of instant, sort of forced, intimate bond with total
like
strangers. I always joke that like with actors, it's you meet, you do a read through, and then you go out to lunch and you're suddenly telling a total stranger your most intimate details. You do this kind of fast pass to
I like that.
to conversations that civilians don't have. Like it takes long time, I find.
I wonder if that your experience with that is what makes you able to be so candid in interviews.
Maybe.
Because you have that experience of jumping past the small talk.
Yeah, maybe.
Anyway, that was just an aside.
Yeah. I think it's one of the most difficult things to navigate about being an actor. How you do scenes, whether they're sexually intimate in nature, whether they're emotionally volatile in nature, even physical comedy. There has to be like so much trust and intimacy.
Gosh. I feel like it would be just like...
We're all over each other's bodies. We're all into each other's minds. And this is a new day and age, right? We are in a culture now that says, wait a minute, there are certain boundaries, there are certain things that it isn't appropriate to talk about. There are certain, physical actions that just aren't appropriate. Mm-hmm. And it was a really interesting investigation into what are those lines, especially with Sherry. We worked over and over and over together again.
Yeah, you'd replaced in Rent together.
We replaced in Rent, then we did last 5 years together, which was just, this hugely bonding experience for the two of us. It was the nature of that show.
That's a two-hander.
It's a two-hander. The nature of that show, it's just like hearts out there, souls out there.
And not just once, but 8 times a week.
8 times a week, right after 9/11, which was this also time where we just, it was downtown. It was right after 9/11 when we did that show, which was really unsuccessful. I mean, that's what people don't realize.
Everything was unsuccessful right then. I mean, I don't think it was it's not like it was,
I wonder.
It was a flop, but like my sister was in New York. She's a journalist, so she came here like to cover what New York was like in the immediate aftermath. Mm-hmm. And she went to a show. I think she actually went to see Aida. And she said that there was like no one in the theater.
Yeah. The first show I went to was just 3 days after 9/11. I went to go see You're in Town. And some friends and we met. We're like, we have to go see a show. Mm-hmm. A funny, joyous, irreverent show just to prove that it was not going to stop us. Broadway is going to keep going. And we laughed and laughed and laughed. I've always loved You're in Town.
It's about pee.
I loved it. I laughed so hard. And I thought, oh, okay, good. It's going to continue because we thought it was going to be done. So anyway, we went through this really intense time. And then we did Dirty Rotten Scoundrels together, which was another sort of super bonding experience. And we were both going through a ton in our personal lives. And when you work with somebody over and over, like a marriage, like an intimate friendship, mm-hmm. It's the thing that actors don't normally do. We only see each other at our best, like we see each other when you're actors, in our most creative points. We're in hair and costume and makeup and we look fabulous. And
there's always a boundary. Like even if you're really, really intimate, you can lean on the fact that that's not really you.
Exactly.
Whereas if your character is in strife, you can get in the moment in the scene with them. But
exactly.
If you're personally in strife, you're jumping without a net.
Yeah. So for Sherry and I, there had been such this familiarity, like a brother and sister, that we could also like really get on each other's nerves. We really knew the buttons to push, like any kind of long-term relationship, mm-hmm. Yeah, and so we just looked at the whole relationship and thought, this is interesting. It's interesting to sort of try to tell a story about how actors navigate intimacy, how they navigate their personal lives, and what happens when those boundaries get crossed. And we did it with some really, really great music. What I learned at the end of it was, and it was Sherry, she kept on not daring me, she kept on writing this great material
for a character named Norbert,
right,
who has a lot in common with you but isn't you.
Yes, but I was supplying her with a lot of sort of the grist from my personal life. Mm-hmm. And when we came time to do it, I loved working on it, but I do have to admit, man, we did, like I used that 2-week run at 54 Below. At the end of it, I was like, playing myself isn't my favorite mm-hmm. part. I was glad for the experience of it, but I did feel like it hit too close to home. I talked about things I had never wanted really to talk about. I was glad I did it because I think it made for a really interesting night. But but I don't think I can play myself again.
Was that recorded? Was that like, will that show live on?
I don't know. It may. We may try to do a recording at some point. I'm not.
But it
really
wasn't
sure.
like recorded live
No,
or anything.
No.
I mean, there's something really magical and innately theatrical of the idea that if you weren't there, you don't get to hear it.
Yeah.
You know? And while I love a cast album, I also think that in order to be able to take risks and say things and tell stories that, you know, you might not want every single person in the whole world who ever Googles you to know,
Yeah.
you have to have the freedom to just work in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And have a feeling of trust and intimacy with the audience without keeping in mind, you know, who might hear it 10 years from now and what the culture will be then.
Exactly.
And actually, that reminds me, in a weird sort of technical parallel, to what you've talked about regarding learning to sing differently for a huge Broadway audience versus for a studio microphone that's right in
Yes.
front of you. It's like, how do you physically and emotionally change when you're performing for a broad audience, whether that's a
Yep.
broad digital audience,
Yep.
a broad time period, or an actual physical giant room versus something so tiny and private.
Yep. You're exactly right. The parallel I make is singing live on a Broadway stage and making a studio record is the same difference as an actor of doing a close-up in a film or doing something at the Broadhurst or at the Lyceum. Do you know? The mic enables you to bring it way down, to use a lot of restraint, to really zero in on sort of like the emotion of the song, rather than having to sell it, having to get it out. And that's a muscle that hadn't been exercised for me for a lot. So I learned a lot making this record too, about singing, about what a mic can do, about just a different way of approaching music when it's coming through cans and you're completely alone and the words are yours.
It's so much like, I want to say, it's not gravelier, but there's something kind of growly about your voice on this record that I associate with that like long haul trucker. I also think the picture of you on the cover of the album is like, you know, sort of, you know, like you've got long hair and kind of like a beard.
That just happened.
You look like an outlaw.
Yeah, that only happened because I did the photo while I was finishing up in My Fair Lady, and I still had my
That was Doolittle.
my Doolittle beard and nasty long hair. Yeah, I look like a mess.
You look very
didn't I?
different now.
Totally.
You look a lot younger.
I
without
did.
all that
Well,
stuff.
I needed to age myself for Alfie a little bit. You know, I was
Yeah,
playing
if you're playing Laura Benante's dad.
Laura Benante's dad. You know, I'm like 8 years older than Laura, so I needed to kind of age it. And same thing with Lauren.
Oh, right. Yeah. Of course. You started with Lauren.
Yeah, when Bart first called me and said, "Hey, how would you feel about working on My Fair Lady with me?" I was like, first of all, I didn't know My Fair Lady. I knew the Shaw play, I knew
Right.
Pygmalion from college, and I was like, "That's the old man, right?" I'm like, "Bart, I'm not. Am I there? Really? Am I really there?" At that point in my career, he's like, You might be a little young, and in fact, I'm not too young for Alfie Doolittle. I'm exactly the right age for
No,
it.
yeah, but-
Stanley Holloway was like in his 70s when he did it, but you know that.
Well,
that,
and Eliza isn't 40
no.
either.
But I did. I thought that the gray beard would age me a little bit. Very happy to lose it. What happens with a beard when it starts to grow? It becomes like a dream catcher. You know those things?
Yeah.
It becomes a dream catcher for food and other sundry
Well, if you're getting
mystery.
hungry later in the day, you can just pick through it. Ugh,
Gross.
that's so funny.
Yeah.
That's something I've never really considered. Is you know, the hygiene of a beard.
It's a lot.
You know, I think about just going back to Catch Me If You Can and like the idea of aging. To see you and Aaron Tveit on stage together, my first thought was like, two Fieros playing father and son.
Yeah.
Or not father and son. I mean, you were like
Kind
a
of.
father figure.
Father figure, yeah.
Tom Wopat played the actual father, but you guys were, you know,
Yeah.
there was that was not accidental. The the energy, the father-son energy
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
And I could totally see being like, no, I'm still Fiyero. I'm not the wizard, you know?
My agents are like, you're not taking any more roles that make you look 15 years older than you are, and no more roles where you wear a fat suit. People think that you're old and fat, and you're not. Would you please stop taking these character parts? We want to get you a role where you actually really look good. And I'm like, but I like these parts, man. They're, yeah. It's, you know, Laura, when I was in high school, the first play I did when I was in high school was A Man for All Seasons. I had a small part, and I played Archbishop Cranmer, who I think was like 90. So I played Pappy Yoakum when I was a sophomore. And I was always the old man, even though I looked like I was 12. I don't know. I had an old soul. I always liked to play the old men.
I feel like it would be really press-worthy if you did go back into Wicked as the wizard.
Oh yes. You know what? I hadn't thought about that.
Oh, it would be so good. You know,
that's an interesting
idea. It would
idea.
give you a good, you know, I feel sort of like now I want to write a thesis on the intersection of Fiyero and the wizard, because they both are kind of like hiding who they truly are, and they prefer the sort of easy route. And, you know, the wizard gets caught up in his own web, but he's kind of dancing through life in his own way for a while.
Yeah, he is.
Do it. As if it's that easy. Although I'm sure you could just make a call.
Hey, Joe, Mr. Mantello, let me go back in.
I
would
run
love
into
it.
Joe every once in a while. I'll let him know. It'd be like going home. Okay. So just switching gears a little bit. First of all, I want to play a little more music.
Yes.
Can we do Hotel Bride?
Yes, that's a really special one for me.
Why is it special?
So that's a song. That's a song that I had started writing. I was in Los Angeles, and I was there shooting something. I can't even remember. And I was in this hotel room way up, and I looked down into the courtyard from my window, and there was this wedding going on right in the middle of the day. This bride and groom, and like right by the pool there. It was not private at all. I mean, it was so odd. I thought this intimate, sacred ceremony is happening in the middle of the day, and I sort of started writing a few lyrics to it. And then what happened, I said, is I went through a divorce, and I fell in love again, which I didn't think was going to happen. And so that song sort of was a combination of me witnessing this public thing, and then what was going on inside me privately kind of affected the shape that the song took. So
that's so funny that you say you were in a hotel in LA, because, excuse me, because now that I know that, I'm sort of picturing the pool at the Hollywood Roosevelt, which is, you know, like just super fancy and glam, and I would totally have a wedding there.
This was not that kind of a pool.
But when
this was a little bit dingy.
Well, yeah. I think in keeping with this idea that I had of the theme of this album as being sort of like on the road in the middle of nowhere, I was picturing this roadside motel, like with tumbleweeds going by.
That's so cool, because I think that what's so interesting for me about songwriting and why I really love it is that, it can start off of an image, and then as the song takes shape, it does. It kind of sends you in this direction, because you're absolutely right. It turned into something else than that first initial image. But ultimately, I love it. It's the only love song on the record for my wife, Michelle. So it's a personal favorite.
Hotel Bride.
Something borrowed and something blue, something old and something new. They could be talking about me and you, my love, my love. Not getting younger, we ain't going nowhere. Past is in ashes and love doesn't care. walk down the aisle was a fall down the stairs, my love, my love. We got a blue motel room and some borrowed time. I got a sweet old feeling and new peace of mind. I know it's not sweet, it's just a little dime. Honey, will you be? Honey, will you be my hotel bride? There's a little courtyard with roses.
I want to make sure that people have are inspired to go listen to the whole thing. We can't give the whole thing away.
Yeah, thanks.
But man, it's full of such longing and relief about having found someone, and I can really identify with that, man.
Yeah, that song is a good example. We were talking about singing in a studio. Using like this mic is fantastic that we're using right now, but like a microphone is amazing, right? In the same way I was talking before about close-ups in film, the same way that the camera can just get behind an actor's eyes. Do you know what I mean? That every subtle face move, right? Is telling a story. When you're working with studio mics, the things that mic picks up, in terms of how you're breathing in, how you're breathing out. You can hear almost the spit in the mouth. You can hear such subtle things, and they're so good. And I've just learned to love it. You don't get that experience when you're singing live.
I bet you can push your voice a little bit more when you're not using it in such a big way. Like, in the studio, first of all, you're not doing it 8 times a week.
True.
But you also don't have to sing to the last row. So
True.
So
the dynamics, can be much, much, much wider, and more liberal. And I just loved that.
Can I ask you something about acting on camera, since you were talking about it? I love what you were saying about how the camera can get behind your eyes. And I think really good on-camera acting always looks like that. But I've talked to some actors, particularly theater actors, who don't like working on camera because so often that emotion is contrived, where or the director wants it to be. They'll say if you can get that tear to come out of your left eye, that'll be better for the shot.
Yeah.
Or
That's a bad director.
Not having the narrative through line of the last 5 years, especially if you're in the timeline going forward, you're acting things in the order they happen, and you get to grow and build and have the, you get to the traumatic part.
Yep.
Because in service of the story.
Right.
Whereas if you're shooting something on camera out of order and you're just expected to have it, can it be as true?
Yes. So you're absolutely right. When you're doing a play, the actor is completely in control of the moment, of the performance. So the theater is an actor's medium, and the camera is a director's medium. And so you're right. For a long time, I had that bias too. I'm like, God, I hate working in front of a camera. I'm just in my head. I'm self-conscious. Hitting marks and self-conscious. But the more and more you do it, this other thing starts to happen, which is really, really exciting. You're right. You shoot out of order. Sometimes you get pages like the night before. You're not super prepared. There's almost no rehearsal time. But this thing starts to change, and this really happened to me, I think, on Bloodline, because it was the most time I got to spend in front of a camera day in and day out. What starts to happen is you accept and just sort of release into the not knowing of what you're going to shoot tomorrow, and so each scene each shoot day becomes its own little one-act play, and so
Oh, interesting.
you're right. You can't do. It's very difficult to do an arc, right, on camera.
It'll look like one
so
to the
you just
viewer.
distill it, and that scene is the whole movie. That's the way I start to think. That's the whole film.
It's like a
getting that
micro
scene. It's a micro,
film.
and so instead of feeling something constricting, it's really freeing, because then you just have to be completely alive in the moment. So the camera, it doesn't lie. It doesn't lie. It will pick up every single lie that an actor does, every single lie. And so you have to just let go and really, really be present, which is what they tell you that we're supposed to be doing on stage. So they actually complement each other. The other thing that I really love working on a set about is there's no audience, but there's a crew. There's a director, there's a DP, there's assistant directors, there are electric guys, there are grips, you've got prop guys, you've got all these people, cinematographer, and actors. And I love this idea that the actor is just another part of the crew in a film set. You've got all of these disparate craftspeople trying to get one shot, one scene, and it gets extremely concentrated. And I love that. I love that the environment is so regulated. Quiet on the set, you stop traffic everywhere, you zero in to this one really tiny moment, right? That like 80 people are trying to get and doing amazing work on. So I love that. I love that, like, how concentrated it gets. In the theater, it's like really hard sometimes to keep your concentration. Latecomers coming in, people getting up, cell phones, right? The person who's eating their lunch right in the first row, an actor who misses their cue, a million things. So I love doing both, I really do. But that specifically, I have really learned to love being on a set. It took me a long time.
What is so amazing, I have goosebumps right now, because while you were talking about that, you like went into it. You went into this intense, focused, like our eyes were like laser beam locked, and I felt a little glimmer, I think, of what you're talking about like everything disappears because you just have to be so focused that it, again, like I just said the word laser, but like condensed, concentrated.
Things get distilled. What needs to be expressed in this scene? What's the main objective here? The camera knows if an actor is really listening or fake listening. If you're really listening. Things that are easy to fake on stage, frankly. They're easy to fake. Because in the theater, it's a full body thing, and you can learn tricks. On camera, it's very hard to have tricks.
Interesting.
So I find it keeps me humble, because you watch stuff back and you're like, oop, missed that. Oop, missed that. So
and then you hear about actors who
barely
cannot watch themselves.
I'm one of them.
Yeah.
It starts to become really, really difficult.
You're pretty fun to watch. I recommend it. We actually are down to our last few minutes, and I really want to get to your cause. I finish every show with information on a nonprofit or charity that's important to my guest. I believe that kind of there's no excuse for having a public platform if you're not using it to make the world a better place. And while we may not be able to, any one of us may not be able to do a ton, if everybody does a little bit, we can make a real big difference.
Amen.
So let's shine some light on the Angel Band project.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Would love to. A lot of people know it was reported widely about 10 years ago. I lost my sister to an act of sexual violence. She was a home invasion. She and her partner were asleep in their house. An intruder came into their house. They were both raped multiple times and lived through a really difficult ordeal. My sister very bravely fought off her attacker. She did die as a result of her injuries that night. As you can imagine, this it just devastated my whole family. I was extremely close to my sister. She was 2 years younger than me. I was in Seattle doing Catch Me If You Can.
And that's where she lived.
And that's where she lived. That was actually a huge perk of the job for me.
I bet.
One of the reasons I took it, she was just a couple of weeks from her wedding. So I thought, oh, this is amazing. She was my best friend. I'll be out there. I'll be in the wedding planning stages and be out there for the wedding. And of course, it didn't happen that way. And then there was a long capital murder trial that my family went through for a year and a half. Her killer was apprehended actually on the day of her funeral, and it was an insane time. It was a crazy time, and on the day of her funeral, I'm from a family of singers. I'm the only person who sort of pursued it professionally, but I'm one of 11 kids, and all of my brothers, we all play something, guitars, pianos. We just had them around the house. My mom's dad was a great musician, could play anything, had a great tenor voice, and my oldest brother's a great guitar player. Another brother of mine is accordion piano player.
So many Butzes.
So many Butzes, yeah. We're like the Osmonds, only with like not as big a teeth, I think, and Catholic. And
Bigger butts.
Yes.
Couldn't resist. Had to slide one in there.
Nice.
No pun intended. Yikes. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
So
I didn't mean to
we
derail
had
this.
her funeral was a celebration of music. We did a lot of singing, and my sister's two best girlfriends from the time she was a little girl were so moved they wanted to capture some of these songs on a CD, and her great friend Rachel Ebling started this not-for-profit called the Angel Band Project, and I soon joined the board. The idea is that we provide music therapy services for victims of domestic and sexual violence. When a woman has her most sacred part of herself violated and traumatized, especially women who have survived, long, sort of drawn out. You're not talking about like a couple of trips to the psychiatrist and then you're okay. It's a lifetime of rehabilitation, of therapy, and for 10 years now, hundreds of women have benefited from music therapists that work for our organization, that work with women. They do songwriting. They do. They work on instruments. They work on singing with other women. It's just been an incredible program. We have one in New York, one in Seattle, and one in St. Louis, Missouri, and we're hoping to grow it even more. So my role is that a couple of times a year, once a year at least, I try to do a concert, a benefit concert, to just raise awareness, to try to raise a little bit of money and get the message out there about the Angel Band Project.
It's so beautiful. I mean, I've been spending some time on the website, which is angelbandproject.org, and there's this section called Virtual Choir.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's an amazing idea. So women can actually, it's a choir that is done interactively through the internet, so that
of survivors,
so that they can connect with each other. I mean, Laura, the stories that I have heard, the people that I have met, the courage that is shown, and the hope that healing, it really is possible.
Yeah.
When people live through these things, you think, how does anyone get through this? That's what people ask me all the time. How did you survive this? How did your family get through? Music, man, it was integral. When something like this happens to you, I always say it's as if the universe stops making sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It does not want good things for you.
You can't fall back on everything happens for a reason.
Exactly. And yet the music continues, and it continues to move. It helps you to weep. It helps to release pain. It helps to embrace joy. It's communal. All of these incredible healing properties that music has. That's the idea behind Angel Band Project.
One of my favorite things about it is that while, like any other charity, donations are gladly accepted at the website, and I'm actually going to be making a donation in yours and Teresa's honor to
You're so
angelbandproject.org. in addition to that, there's an opportunity for musicians to donate shows. There's a section on the website. It's under the heading Our Work. If you click on benefit concerts, the heading says there's nothing quite like the experience of live music. The Angel Band Project hosts benefit concerts featuring musicians who are passionate about using their voices to engage people with the issue of sexual violence. And you can actually donate a concert. So if you're a musician and you want to hold a concert from an audience of as low as 50 to up to 1,000 people, and I'm sure more, there's contact information. So if you are a musician, if you're an artist, and maybe you're living paycheck to paycheck and you don't have the money to donate, your art can be your currency.
Absolutely.
And what a beautiful idea of a way to donate to a cause.
You said it earlier so beautifully. Alone, we feel so powerless that we can add anything positive, right? To the culture, to a society. What can I do? It's overwhelming. But you're absolutely right. Everyone can, right? In small ways. And that's a great example of how to do that.
I just think that if everybody who heard this interview donated $5, there was a point at which I wouldn't donate if I only had $5 because I thought, how embarrassing. They're going to be like, oh, $5, but like they add up. And the tagline that I've sort of come up with, I don't know if I invented it or whatever, like I coined it, but is that, enough little drops can make a big splash.
Amen.
And so like, don't worry about it if you don't have $1,000. Donate one. Yep. Or like turn your camera on and put a video on YouTube of yourself playing a song. Yeah. And put the Angel Band Project in the caption.
Yeah. Great idea.
Spread the word. Norbert Leo Butz, it's been so wonderful to have you here. I've been a fan forever.
Likewise.
And I just become more and more of one the more I get to know you.
Likewise. And your pink hair is fantastic.
Thank you.
Going with the aqua
I waited till I was 40 years old to do something that I've been wanting to do since I was 16.
It looks dope.
Thank you.
DOF, as the kids say.
Dope. Kids say that?
No, DOF. Dope as
Oh, got it. I was like, I thought I misheard your pronunciation of the word dope. That's hilarious. All right. Well, thanks for being DOF, Norbert Leo Butz. Come back again sometime. This is Laura Heywood Interviews.